Hi guys, welcome to another episode of our full stack mobile development series. In today's episode, we are going to focus on the sign up screen in the onboarding process. In our previous episode, we built the onboarding screen and tested it on both our iPhone 15 Pro here, as well as our iPad Air 11-inch. Now to begin, we head over to Android Studio, scroll down to the lib, to views, and then we'll create a new folder called auth. Now in the auth, we'll create a .dat file called signup. Here we will create a stateful widget called signup screen. And then we go ahead and import material. Okay. So now what we are trying to say is when the user clicks on the sign up here, we route them to the sign up screen. So we go over to our main, head over to the route, create a new route called sign up. And in the main, we add the sign up here, which routes to the sign up screen. Okay, so now let's test it. When the user clicks on the sign up, nothing happens, and that's because we have not handled the on tap event in the button. So we head over to our components, to our button, and then on press, we want to get the on press. So here we say that the on press is equal to the widget dot on pressed. Okay, and then we head over to our onboarding screen, to the walkthrough. Now when the user taps on the sign up, we want to route them to what we said the sign up screen was. So we go to navigator of the contest, push name instead of push name replacement here, because we want them to go back and forth in this. So when they click on the sign up, they come to the sign up page and they can come back to the onboarding screen. So that's why we're using push name instead of push named replacement. So here we say that our app routes dot sign up. All right. So let me just go ahead and restart my application. We would for now stop running it on the iPad Air. Can go ahead and close it for now. So now when they type on the sign up, it should read that. It should route them to the sign up page. So as you can see, but when they tap on the login, nothing happened because we've not done that yet. So this is our sign up. Now let's look at our sign up screen. So on the sign up screen, we need the test input here for the name, email, and password, a checkbox with this test, as well as a primary button and the light button with this test. So let's go ahead and first build our components needed for the screen. So let's head over to Android Studio, and in the components, I'm going to create a new directory called form, and then create a .dat file called test input. Now I'm going to create a stateful widget, call it test input component. All right, and then we import material. Okay, so for now, we would let this return test form field. Okay, and then in our sign up page, we would want to show that. So here we change this to a scaffold. Now the scaffold is going to have an app bar. If you look at the screen here, we have this app bar with the back button and its test. So we have the app bar, which has a title, which is a test, app string sign up. Let's look at it. So here we have the sign up. This should be app strings, not app routes. Okay, so sign up. And then if you look at the back button we have here and the one in the UI, it's different. There's the arrow, so we can override that. To do that, we are going to call the leading, and here we have to pass a widget, which is going to be an icon data dot icons dot the back. Okay, so now we have our arrow right? But when you tap on it, nothing happens. And that's because we need to handle that. And for here, we are going to use just an equal. And what we are going to say is when the user taps on that, we just want to pop, which will remove the screen from the stack. So here we just pop and then it goes back, right? So pop and then it goes back. Okay, now we also want to let our title match exactly what we have in the UI here. So here we have the title here, which is semi-bold of 18. So we have to apply the styles. We can just go ahead and add const here. Okay, now in the previous episode, we imported our fonts, but we only imported the bold and the regular. We did not import the one for the medium. So we'll go ahead and head over to Google Fonts and then download the interfonts here. Go ahead and open it. And then we want the medium, right? So here I come to my import the medium, just drag and drop it here. And then I head over to my prospect.yml file, duplicate this, and I call it medium. And I'll say that the weight for our medium should be 600. Okay, so if we give this weight, it would use this font. Okay, so now we head over to our sign up screen. And then for our title, we are going to pass a style. And then we are going to call our app styles. For now, we just go ahead and this is medium 16, but in the UI it is semi-bold or medium 18. So here we have let's create one called the app title, which is by default 18, and it's right. So we head over here and then we call this app title. So now we have it just as in the UI, right? Great. And then we go ahead and then declare our body. So our body is going to be a list view because the form, depending on the screen, can become longer and you would want the users to scroll up and down. So we are going to use the list view for that. And then we're going to have the children. Okay, so here let's first use our test input component. Okay, so we have our component here. Now this renders this. Okay, so as you can see, we need padding in the screen. So in the list view, we say that padding all 24. So now that is our text input. Now let's design it to look like this. As you can see, we have this rounded border with the text in it. Okay. To do that, we head over into our component here. And then we first take the most important thing. So here we need to know what the label is, what the hint is, and everything. So I'm going to first need a final string, which is my label. So that's going to be the label in the text box. I'm going to make this required. So here I'll need my decoration, which is going to be an input decoration. And then I'm going to pass my label. I just want to pass the label test, which is going to be my widget.label. Right. And then I head over to the sign up. So at this point, I need to provide the label, and the first label is the name. So here I just say name. Okay, let's look at it. So you can see we have the name. If you go back, that's the name. Okay, the next thing is we want to fix the border. So here we go back to our component, and then inside the component we want the border, and this is going to be an outline input border. right? So let's look at it. So that's the outline input border. Now let's get the radius here. The radius is 16. Okay, so we head over into this and then we go to border radius, which is going to be a border radius circular 16. And let's look at our, as you can see, it's nicely rounded. Okay, so now there are three types of borders: the border, which is the default one, the border when it is enabled, the border when it is focused, right? So we first want to fix the first border and then we do the one when it's focused and when it is enabled. Okay, so here you want to also work on the border side, which is going to be a border side. And then for the color, we want to use the color for the border from our app colors here. Now, if we come in here, you realize that it has this gray border. And if we go to our components here, we go to the core visuals, it has the light 20. Okay, so that's the light 20. And then we get the color code for the light 20. We already have it defined here. Okay, so in my test input, light 20, and that should give us the border. But as you can see, the border is still doesn't look like what we have here, and that's because it's a bit faded. Okay, so we are going to say that this color with opacity, and then we're going to give it, let's say, an opacity of 0.2. Now this is the border. So I said we want to first work on the enabled border. So now as you can see, it has the faded one there. Let's make it 0.5 and see. Yeah, this is light enough. You see, so that's the border. I realize when we focus on it, then it changes, right? So we need to do the same thing. We can just first get the first border, which is rightly so. So this affects everything. And then we say that when it is enabled, right, it looks like this when it is enabled. Okay, and then when it is focused, so when it is focused, we want it to have the focused border. We want it to have our primary color. So when it is focused, that's the primary color. We can just for now remove the opacity so that we have the full primary color. So as you can see, it's just as we have in the UI. Okay, as soon as it is focused, then it shows like this. Okay, and then we want to also change the style for the label. You realize that in the UI, it is a bit, it's the light 20. Let me just say it's the light 20 here. And then when we have it here, it's black, not the light 20 that we have. Okay, so say label style, which is going to be a test style. And inside the test style, we want the color to be our app colors light 20. Right, so as you can see, it is faded. And then we have it there. Okay, so in here, great. It's faded as it is in the UI. And that is our name. Okay, so now let's do the same for the email and then the password. So in our form here in the sign up, we do not want to hard code the string, so we just take this away and we say app strings. We come in here and then we change this to name. We have the email address, so just say email address, and then we have the password, and then I say password. All right, so here this is the name, and then I do the same thing for the email as well as the password. Okay, so we have the three forms here, and then we want to put some spaces. So here we want to say const size box, and then we want to have a height of 16 between them. All right, now you realize that in the app we've been using a lot of const size box so many times. So what we want to do is we want to abstract this away, and what we are going to do is in our UI here in our app resources, okay, we are going to create a new .dat file and call it app spacing. All right, so we have a class app spacing which has a static size box called, and here we want to have the vertical and the horizontal spacing. So we first have the horizontal spacing. We should take a double size. By default it's equal to 16 for the horizontal, right? And then this should return a size box with a width of that size that we pass. I can just convert this to a one-liner here. Okay, we do the same thing. So vertical, and here we want to say the height, which is 16. Okay, so we can say by default is 24. Okay, and then in our sign up screen here, we then use our app spacing dot vertical, right? But here the sizes are 16, so we want to say size 16. If we do not pass the size, it's 24. So let's look for all usages of this const here, and you find most of them in the walkthrough. When it's height 24, we want to replace it with the vertical in the sign up here. So in the walkthrough, this should be as this, right? So we're going to say is every usage of this, we want to replace it with that. Okay, good. And then we look for other ones. So this is size. Let's first import this tracing. So this size of 16. Okay, and then we have size of 48, and then a size. So this is a width. So that's app spacing dot horizontal of size 8. All right, let's look for other usages. So in the walkthrough we have app spacing dot vertical of size 16. All right, now let's restart our entire application and then see it in use. Okay, so we have our spacing and we also have our spacing. Now in this case, we want to change how we implement spacing. We can do it here and it would affect every other place that we use the spacing. Now let's go ahead and improve our form a bit more. Okay, so now we have the password. As you can see, the password has this visibility icon to show or hide the password as the user types it. And when the user types the password, we also want to obscure it instead of showing this. Okay, so in our test input, we want to take a boolean and say that it's password, which shouldn't be required, right? But by default it's false. Okay, uh, that means that if the user wants to show the password or not. Okay, now in our decoration here, what we want to then do is if the test form field, we want to obscure the test if the test form field is password, right? So here we go back to our sign up screen, and on the password here we say that it's password. Okay, we say that that is true, and realize that it's obscured from the other ones. Okay, all right. And then another thing is we want to add the icon. So here we come back to our decoration and we say surface icon. Now, if it is a password, so if the widget is a password, okay, we want to show an icon, which is the visibility icon. So visibility, we want to use the outline version. If not, we want to show an empty space. Okay, so app spacing here. Let's add the default one. Okay, so app spacing. We do not want to do first color views. We just say empty. Okay, and this doesn't take anything, but it rather returns just the size box, which is a const. Okay, so in our test input, we just want to say empty. Okay, good. And then here we say this is a const. All right, so you realize that it shows for only the password, but not for the other ones. And to test that, we can say that let's make this also a password. We say its password is true. And you realize that the email then shows the same thing, but the email is not a password. Okay. All right. So now let's first let the color look the same as we have here. This is a bit darker. And to do that, we go to the visibility here, and then we say that the color is equal to our app colors dot light 20. Okay, and we have to take away this constant then. Okay, so now we have it as it should. Now when the user taps on this, we want to hide the password. And to do that, we have to track that state locally in this component. So we have to introduce our variable called show password, which is a Boolean, and by default is false. Okay, so what we want to do is want to change this icon based on whether the user is showing the password or not. And we can look at that in our components here. All right, so this we want to show the one that is time crossed out when the user is showing the password or not. And to do that, we say that if the show password is true, that means we want to say visibility off. Okay, and then if not, then we show this. Okay, so based on this show password, and now we have to track the state. So we come to our entire icon here, so the entire surface icon here. Let's first format the code. Okay, so we take this entire icon and then we wrap it in an include, and then we say that it is the child. Okay, and then on top we want to handle that here, so we have a void toggle password. So on top we want to toggle the password, right? So here what we are just, you can just write it in a one-liner, which is going to just toggle the state, and then we say that the show password is equal to what it wasn't before. Okay, great. Okay, now the password doesn't change, and that's because here we are obscuring test. So what we want to do is, if it's a widget and we have to show the password, okay, then we toggle it. So as you can see here, but we have to fix this. Now what we want to say is, if the person that is showing the password, then we say visibility off. If not, visibility on. So if I come here, I go to this, the password by default is not being shown, and then when I times this, then it hides. So what we are going to do is, by default, yes, we are not showing the password, and then we are saying that obscure the test if the widget is password is true, and not when the person wants to show the password. So when it show password is off, then we obscure the test, right? So here, as you can see, when we go back and then we type by default is hidden, and then we show it and then we hide it. So that is how our password toggle works, right? So here, that is it. Another thing is we want to also change this. Okay, so now we have this. Perfect. Okay, we have everything there. All right, and then the next thing is we need to have our checkbox here. So for the checkbox, I'm going to create a new flat file here, and I'm going to say checkbox input. Now this is also going to be a stateful widget, and it's going to be called checkbox input component. And then I'm going to import material. Okay, so now there's this space between this. So here we go to our sign up, we have our spacing, and then we import our checkbox input component. All right, so here we have this placeholder. Now let's build our checkbox. Now for now, let's just return a checkbox, and it requires a value and then something to track when it's changed. So here we have our final boolean, and then we say that the value final value changed boolean, and this will be our unchanged. Okay, so we add that to this, and then here, because this is a stateful widget, we want to keep track of the state, so we just want to say late bool value, right? And then that means we need to get it on init state. So on init state, our value is equal to our widget dot value. That's the initial value that's being passed. Okay, and here we have the boolean, which is nullable, and here we say that the new value. Okay, and then we want to pass this, so we say set state, and then we say that our value is equal to the new value, which is done now, and then our widget dot unchanged is our new value. So this will then pass it to the sign up page. Okay, so now let's add here, we just say it's false, that's the value for now, and unchanged, when we get the value, we want to just print it. Okay, so let's print the value for now. All right, so let's move to our run, and then we have to restart. Okay, okay, so now that's our checkbox. When we check it, you can see it prints true, false down here. All right, so now let's style it to look like this. Okay, and to do that, we head over to our checkbox here, and then we specify the active color, which is going to be our app colors dot primary, and the check color, which is going to be colors dot white. And as you can see here, if we go to our component on the checkboxes, when it's checked, it's white and the primary color. Okay, so now let's look at it here. Right now, when it's unchecked, it's the primary color, that's the border. So we select the side, and then we choose border side. Here we specify our color, which is our primary colors, and then we save. So now let's look at it. As you can see, it's here. Now the component is smaller than what we have here in our design. So you see our checkbox is pretty much smaller than what we have. This is at least off with 24. So what we are going to do is we first take all of this and we put it in the transform scale, and the child is this, and then we scale it by at least 2. Let's get twice the size, and now this is it when it's big. So let's look at it when it's really big. As you can see, we have the border and everything. Now let's scale it to 1.5. Okay, so this is good enough, and then it has to be on the side, and then we have our text by it. Right, so to do that, what we are going to do is we are going to take all of this, return a row, and in our row we are going to have this. Now by default, the row will go to the side, as you can see here. So in the row, then we want to have the text which is close to it, and this is it. We first get this, go to our app strings, and then we put it here. So by signing up, you realize that this is different from this, so we are going to split that as well. So agree test, and then we are going to call this one is the terms and privacy. Okay, so the agree text and then terms and privacy. Okay, so we have this here. Now in our checkbox, we want to show that text, and we want to show all of them on the same line, right? The only difference is the color that's changing, and to do that, we can use a text span with a rich text here. So here we have our text span, and the text is going to be our app strings dot agree text here. So now let's look at it. So by signing up, we agree to the right, and then we are going to have the children in the text span. Okay, and in here we are going to have another text span, so we can just go ahead and copy this one. All right, and here is our terms and privacy. Now I realize that it's overflown here, and what we want to do then is we want to first take this, take an expanded, and put it in the chart. So what will happen is it will take the checkbox here, and then everything else, the test rich, which has the text span, would expand and fill up the entire space left. Right, so now the next thing is we need to format this to make sure that the size matches, and here we have this, which is of medium 14. All right, so we already have our medium 14, so we go into the text rich here, and then we say that the text style is equal to our app styles dot medium. So let's import the app styles dot medium, and the size is 40. All right, so let me format this. Okay, so now you can see it's bolding up. All right, now let's make another adjustment. Now in our font, we have the semi bold, and then we had the medium, which we moved. So we also want to have the semi bold as well. So we move this one here, and then in our prospect.yaml file, we duplicate this. So we say that this is the semi bold. So let's get the name. So semi bold, and the medium is now 500, so that we get the medium in the right side. So in the medium here, we change this to 500, change this as well to 500, because that was also a medium. No, the title was a semi bold. Now this is our medium, and then we come to our checkbox here. So now, great, it looks close to what we have here. So as you can see the text. Now the next thing is to put the color, and you can see we need a space between this. So to do that, we have our children here, and we need to have a widget span, which has a chart. And here we can put our app spacing, and it should be a horizontal spacing of size 8, right? And then we have our rich text span here. So now there's a size there. I think 8 is too much. Let's make it 4. Okay, now we have this. And then this text span, what we want to do is we want to change the color. So we have the style, which is going to be our app styles dot medium. The size is 14, but then the color is app colors primary, right? Okay, so now we have this, which is same as what we have here. So that's our checkbox, and then this. And as you can see, there's a bit more spacing between the checkbox as well as this. So we head over to our text span here, and then in between the agree text and the checkbox, which is up here, we want to have an up spacing of horizontal 4. I think that should be enough. Of size 4. Okay, so yeah, I think that is enough. All right, now the reason why this is in a different color is when the user taps on this, we want to show them the terms of service and privacy policy. So when they tap on it, we want to show them that, but for now we'll leave that. So what we did was we put the text here in the checkbox and we want to move it out. Okay, and then take it as parameter. So here we have our final label, which is going to be a widget. Okay, and then we add it here, and then what we are going to say is that we have this. So if we have our widget.label, then we render all this. So if this is not null, okay, and what we are saying is that this can be null and thus is not required. Okay, so if the user does not provide it, you see that there's nothing here, right? And in our row, we can see that main space evenly. Okay, so once the user passes this here, so here we take everything that's in expanded and then we say that widgets dot label at this point, which is not now, and then we show the widget, and then we go to our sign up, and then here we want to pass the label, which is going to be our rich text. Here we import the colors, right? So now we have it there. So if we do not pass the label here, if we do not pass the label at any point in time, it will just render a checkbox, right? Yeah. Okay, so once we pass the label, it will do this, and the reason why it's in the center is because we are doing this, but for now we can just remove this. Okay, so that's our checkbox and everything. I think the text is okay. Okay, all right, the next thing is we have our button. So we go ahead and in our sign up, we first get our spacing. For now, remember, we are just printing what the checkbox is at any point in time down here, but we'll make a change when we are setting up the form. Okay, so here we change this to 24, which is the default, and then we have our button component, and the label is going to be an app strings dot sign up. And when it's pressed, we also want to print sign up. For now, that's what we want to do. Okay, so here when they tap on this, we are printing the sign up. Okay, and that's our button, and beneath the button we have this test or where. So let's first get our test. Now we need our app spacing dot vertical of size 16, and then we have our text, which is going to be our app strings. Here we want to call this or width, and then I paste it here. Let's go ahead and get the remaining text. So we have sign up with Google. So here sign up with Google, and then already have an account login. So already have an account, we already have the login test. So we just set this one. Already have accounts is the same as what we did up here. So we're just going to replicate it. All right, so in a sign up here we say or with, and then we can get the size. So this here is bold 14. So as you can see, it's bold 14. So we can just say styles up styles. So we have medium 18, and then we have this up bar. So we can go for another one here, bold by default 16, but this is bold, which is same as, so bold is same as 700. You can look at it here. Okay, and then we go into bold. So here that's bold, and by default is 16. So here we just say bold, but we want the size to be 14, right? So now that's our text here, and we also want to change the color. As you can see, is the light 20. So the color is appcolors dot light 20, right? So that's it there, and then we want to align it in the center. So test align, let's go to test align dot center. So that's the test there. Okay, and then spacing, we have below the test is our button. Now this is a new type of button. In the previous episode we only did the primary and secondary, so this is sign up with Google. Okay, and then it shows here. Now this one shows a different type of button, and I can show you in our components here. We have the button, the primary, secondary, and the sign up with Google, which is this white one. So we're just going to call it the lights button. So here I'm going to pass the type, which is going to be a button type, right? And then we have primary, secondary. So I'm just going to go here and add a new one, which is going to be the light. And I come out here and I change this to light. Okay, so by default everything is going to be same as the primary, but we have to make some few changes. Okay, so here we are checking this. If it's not secondary, if it's yeah, if it's secondary, then we show the primary color light, and we show the primary color for the test. We realize that if we add another text, our ternary operation would grow. So now let's use a map. So we are going to set up a final map, which is going to take the button type. Okay, and here what then we want to do is the button type is not null, but by default we are going to say that the button type is primary, so that it's not null. The user doesn't have to pass it, but by default it's primary. So now we have the button type, which should return a color, and we have two types of colors: the background color and the foreground color here. And then for the next one we have a border, which is the light 20 with opacity. Okay, and in our previous one we had opacity of 0.5. Okay, so here we have first the background color, which is a map. So what we are saying is if the button type is primary, the background color is our app colors background. So app colors background color. Now if it is secondary, it is app colors background color light. If it's the light version, it is colors dot white. Okay, so that's the background color. Let's see how we can use this. So we go down here. This is where we specify the background color. And what we are going to do is this map, then the widget dot type. Okay, so this should give us the same thing. I realize that we have the whites here, but we've not touched the foreground. So now the same thing we did for this, what we are changing here is the foreground color. So if it's primary color, the text here, what happens is this changes. The text becomes white, the secondary becomes the primary, and this becomes black. Okay, so that's the foreground, and that's what we are going to change here. So we say that the foreground color is equal to the widget dot type. Now this does not accept an allowable color, so because we know we are always going to have a type, we just say that this, and then we move on. So now we have the sign up here, which is white, and then the next thing left is the border. And to do that, we go to our shape here, and then we go to the side, and then we have the border side, and we have the color, right? So the same thing as we did for this one, we say that the border color. So the primary is going to be the same as the primary, yeah. But here the border for this is up colors light and with opacity of 0.5, right? So we change this to border color, and then we pass the widget type. The same thing, we say that it's not now, and then we have this. So as you can see, we have our sign up with Google here, shown here, compared to this. Now, one thing we are missing out here is you see this background is white, but this does not look like white, and that's because in our scaffold in the sign up here, we did not specify what the background color is, and we have to use our app colors.pg color, and that should give us this form. So now if we compare this as we have it here to this, now the only missing thing here is the icon. Okay, but let's double check the test. So for the test here is semi-bold 18 for the button. So in the button test, so I go to my button component, it's title 3. Title 3 is semi-bold, which is 600, and it's 18, which is correct. Okay, now what we are missing is this icon here. So we need to specify icon, and I can just go ahead and export this icon. I just scroll down here, preview with this, my Google icon. So Google, and then export it. I have it here, right? And then I'm just going to go to my images. I just want to rename this to Google first, and then drag it in here. Refactor. That's my Google icon. Okay. So now in my button here, from the previous episode, we specified the icon, but we did not implement it here. So we are going to do that. And what we are going to do is we are just going to first take this test, and we are going to return a row. We want to take the entire test instead. We are going to return a row, and this row is going to have children, and the first one is this. And as usual, main axis is center. So we center everything in the text. So we still have the same thing. And now if we have the widget icon, if the icon is not now, then we render what the icon is. So widget.icon. All right. So if it's not now, we render it. If it's now, we just ignore it. Okay. So here we come to our sign up, and then on the Google button here, I have an icon. Because I'm passing a widget, I can just say pardon, and then have a chart with an image from my assets. So my assets images google.png, and then in my padding I have edge insets all 24, right? So that should return, that's my icon there. I can just go ahead, let's first return this, and then we fix the padding if any. So that's it there. So now let's fix the padding. Let's first start with 8 just to see. Good. And we compare it to this, it's a bit smaller, so we can go ahead and use 16. I think this is okay. No, 16 is a bit too much. Go ahead to 12, and then put the cons here, just down here. All right, so that's our sign up with Google button there. Okay, and then we have the text that's also below. So you have the buttons and everything, and the text that's also below. And this one is medium 16. So we copy this vertical space in here, and then we need a text. So here we need the text rich here that we did up here. We just copy this, and then we have medium 16, right? So medium 16, and this is medium 16. But here the test is login, and this one is already have an account, right? And that's our text. So the next thing is we want to specify the alignment. So text align, no, text align, sorry. Go to center, right? So it will center it in there. So that's it here. I think we can do well with a bit more spacing in between the buttons and the text. So we can just go ahead and use 24 just to see. I think this is good enough. Good. All right, so we have this. And then, yeah, so that's our sign up screen. We've implemented the components, and this, we are here to make it into a form with validation, right? So yeah, let's make a few more improvements to our code before we proceed. Another thing is you realize that the login here is underlined, and when the user taps on this, it should take them to the login screen. So let's underline it, and we'll just head over to our text. So here we have the app style here. Now what we are going to do is with this, we are going to copy with, that means whatever it's there, we're going to add our new one, and that's our decoration. And we have the text decoration dot underline. We should underline our text, right? But you realize that the underline is not the same color as this, and to do that we just say decoration color, and then we have our app colors, which is primary color, same as what we have here. And now the two of them, this will change from black to this. So yes, that is our signing page. Another thing is we also have to set the color. So if you look at the app bar here, the entire screen is white, of white background. So we have to also set the app bar background color here to appcolors.bg color, right? And then we have this. Okay, now we're in the next episode, we are going to make an improvement where we are going to abstract this, because we are going to be reusing this style of app bar. So we're going to take this away, and then we're just going to pass the title, and then yeah, we're going to use that. So let's make this improvement. Okay, one last thing, on iOS you realize that this is centered, but on Android devices it might move to the left, but in our UI it's in the center. So to ensure that in our app bar here, we say that the center title is true, so that at all times the title is centered. So here, that is our sign-in screen. This is the UI from the Figma. You can see pretty close. All right, now let's go ahead and set up our form. Before that, let's look at here. You realize there's spacing in between. If it's too close, let's give more room in between our components. I think here we know, let's stick to the 24 for the spacing, and use the 60 when we think we need it. I think this one gives us more room here in between. Okay, all right. And another improvement we should make now is that on iOS, you realize that if the user taps on this, if the user taps outside the form, the keyboard still shows. On Android, they have, some devices have a back button, so when they press the back button, the keyboard hides. But for iOS, they have to press the done, and if they do not, the keyboard still stays, right? So we want to do it such that when they tap outside the area, the keyboard hides. And to do that, we are going to wrap the entire scaffold here first into a gesture detector, and then we are saying that on tap, we say that the focus scope of the context, we on focus, right? So let's go ahead and test it. So here, if the person is typing the name and taps outside, the keyboard should hide. Okay, taps outside, the keyboard should hide. So here, but when they tap on this, it stays, but when they tap outside, the keyboard should hide. Okay, so that's very important. As soon as they tap outside, we should hide the keyboard, right? Good. Now let's build our form. And to do that, we will first also take the list view here in our body. And wrap it in a form. Now the form requires a key. So I'll create my key up here. And I say that the final form key is equal to a global key of form state. All right. And then I pass my key here. So now I have my form. Nothing happens. We are going to validate this. Now to validate this, we need to keep track of what happens in this text boxes. And to do that, we are going to need a controller for each text box. So here, final name editing controller, which is going to be a test editing controller. We need one for the email and one for the password. Right now in our text boxes here, we are going to need a final text editing controller, which is going to be our text editing controller. And we are going to add it here. Right, so that means in a sign up here, we need our text editing controller, which is going to be our name. Right, so the same thing here is the email, so as this is the password. Okay, so we've passed our controllers, which is going to keep track of this. Okay, and then another thing we need is we need to then handle the movements between the text boxes. Okay, to do that, we head over to our test input component. So in here, we also need to keep track of certain things. So on field submitted, we're going to have a final value changed, right, which is going to be a string on field submitted. And here is going to be our widget dot on field submitted. And then we're also going to need a test input action, which is going to be a final text input action. All right. So for all these ones, we can make them nullable if the user doesn't provide it. If we do not provide it, we do not want to make it required. So the same thing here. So widget dot text input action. Okay. And the reason why we are doing this is here in our sign up, in the name, for example. So on field submitted, okay, what we want to do is when the user types the field, okay, and press done, we want to move to the next thing. And so that means we need to focus on the email. And to do that, we need a focus node, right? So we have a final name focus, because in focus node. Okay, so the email focus, the password focus. Okay, and we need to pass that to the test form field as well. So here you have our focus node, which is going to be the widget dot focus node. Okay, and we can come here final focus node, which is going to be focus node like this, and we add a field. Okay, so here if the name is done, we want to have the email focus node focus, so focus scope dot of the context. So request focus, and here we pass the email focus. Okay, now because we've added these new things, I think we want to add the rest. So the name, we need to add a focus node for the name, which is the name focus. The email focus node, which is the email focus, and the password focus node, which is the password focus. Right. Okay, let's first reload the entire application. Okay, now we go to sign up. If I type something in the name and I press done, you see it automatically moves to the email. Good. So now the next thing is, when they type here, we do not want to show them done. We want to show them that they should go to the next field, which is the email. And for that, we go over to our test input component again. Here we are going to add the text. We already have that text input action. So if it's not defined, right, we say that the text input action is next. Okay, so that means if we do not define what the next action next, it should go next. So now you can see next, right, which makes more sense. Now if it's defined, then we use it. Okay, all right. So here on the name, we can leave it, or we can specify the text input action, just text input action, and that's next. We do the same thing for the email, but for the password, it's going to be done, right? We can say send, but for here we just want to say done so that it closes everything and then we pass it. Another thing is, if you look at the text box, if you notice, when we come to the email, we get this, but we want the user to type email, so we also want to pass the type. And to do that, we say text input in our text form field. Here we say keyboard type, and then we have our text input type, right? So we are going to take the text input type from the widget. So we have a final text input type, which is going to be our text input type. Okay, and here it's going to be our widget text input type. Okay, so in the sign up on the email, here we say test input type. It's going to be a test input type email address. And then for the name, let's say the text input type is going to be text input type of type name. Okay, so now let's look at it. You realize that if we come to the sign up, here we get space and at, but when I go to the name, I don't get the at, right? So the keyboard changes per the input type. And the reason why we're using this test component is, as soon as we make a change here, it affects all the usages of the text input component, right? So that is how we do it. Great. So now here, go to next, and I go to next, and here it's done. Okay. So I start from here, next, next, done. Good. Now, once we have this, we've set up the navigation in our form. We want to then validate the form. So one last thing we want to add before we do the validation is, here we want to say final, a boolean, and we say that it's required. So is it a required field or not? That's going to help us in the validation. Okay, so here it's required. It's not going to be required. It's going to be false by default unless it's stated as required. And here we are going to do the validation if it's required. So we say that validator on the value. Okay, so if it's required, then we need the value to be provided. Okay, so if the widget dot is required here, if this is false, then we return null. There's no need to do any validation. But if the value then is null, or the value is empty. Okay, so if it's null or it's empty, then we return the field is required. Right, so for now, let's do this. We are going to move this to a better approach. If not, we are going to return now. So that means if it's not required at all, we do not return anything. But if it's null and empty and it's required, then we return this. But if there's a value, then return out. So the validator, once it's null, means that everything is fine. There won't be any error. We will make a change to the declaration to show the error and style it nicely. So now here in our name, we say that is required, is true. The password is required and the email is required as well. Okay, so what we are doing at the moment is we are building the validation for our form. Okay, so now once the user submits, let's handle that here, submit. Okay, and then we go to our sign up here. So this is sign up with Google. Let's note this one here. Once they're on press, we say that submit. Okay, all right, so this will submit this. And then this is where we want to make sure that the form has passed the validation before we submit. And to do that, we say that if the form key, which we define up there, dot current state dot validate. So if it cannot validate, right? And here it's saying this because it thinks that it's now, but we are going to say that it's not now because we defined it. And then we set it up here in our form key. Okay. So if it's now, if you cannot validate, we need to stop whatever we are doing. So we can just at this point return. Now, if it validates successfully, we say that success. We can just want to show this for now. And then let's show our run. Okay. Now let's tap on this. It says success. Now let's go back, come back here, tap on this. Now you realize that it's complaining that these fields are required. Okay. Now if I type something, it still says it's required, but as soon as I submit again, now it says this. Now let's make a change. When I click on the submit, I want to hide the keyboard. So on submit, I want to say focus scope dot of the context on focus, right? So here, as soon as I tap this, it should hide the keyboard. Okay, and then show me the errors I have. And then I type this. Okay, and then we'll have to validate to make sure that this is a valid email. And then I have the password. Now it prints success. Okay, now let's work on the validation again. Now in the text input here, we want to say auto validation mode. On user interaction. So here, let me just go back, come back. If I don't type anything, it gives me this. But as soon as I start typing, it should validate again. Then it hides the error. Okay. Then it hides the error. Good. Then it submits. Perfect. Now we want to do this in a better way. So we take this here, go to our app strings, and then say that field is required. Or we say input is required, sorry. So here I say input is required. Okay, so input is required. Okay, and then in my test input here, I return app strings, but input is required, and I replace every repetition of input. Yeah, I replace all input with my label, the label I have, which is the widget dot label, right? So now if I go here, come back again, now I get name is required, email address is required, and password is required. So depending on the field, they will tell you that that field is required. And that's the error we get. You realize it's red, which is nice. You can just leave it as such. And then we submit. Okay. In the form, once the user taps on the sign up, we want to show the user the animation that is loading. And then we also disable this input so that they cannot make any change whilst the form is being submitted. So in our sign up here, we are going to go into our test input and then add one last thing and say that it's loading or it's enabled. Let me use it's enabled instead. Okay, and then it's a boolean. By default it is true, so it's not going to be required. By default it's going to be true. By default it's enabled. And then in our test form field we say enable this widget dot is enabled. Okay, so now in the sign up we go up here. Okay, we can refactor this and rename it into sign up. Okay, so here when the user submits, here sign up, and the form is clean, we want to keep track of whether it's loading or not. So here we can just have a final boolean and say that it's loading, which is equal to false by default. Okay, and then here for now we're just going to simulate. So just going to load for 5 seconds. Then it's going to set state, which is going to set the loading is loading to false. Okay. Oh yes, sorry, we set this as a final. So sorry. Okay, you can just remove the unnecessary new keyword, add the const. Okay, so we first set this to be loading, and after 5 seconds we see that it's no longer loading, and we can just even print the success after the 5 seconds. Okay, so I just change this, and then now I can good. Now when we submit, we wait for 5 seconds and then we get a success. Okay, nice. So now let's show the user what's happening. So here you realize we have this. Now if I submit, I shouldn't be able to change any of this until the 5 seconds is up. Okay, so first let's work on the button to show that it's being loaded. So in my button component, I'm going to add a boolean which is going to say it's loading, and by default it's going to be false. Okay, by default it's not loading. Now when my button is loading, I want to hide everything in the button and show the loading state. Okay, so I take my row and I say widget dot is loading. I want to show a circular progress indicator. If it's not loading, I want to show my row. Okay, so now let's test that. As soon as I tap this, show my row. Okay, now before we do that, you realize that for the button here, it does not track any local states. Everything is coming from the sign up page or the walkthrough wherever it's being used. So we want to convert this into a stateless widget. Okay, first we look at our sign up here. And then in the it's loading for the button component for this one, sorry, it's loading here. We pass our is loading to it. Okay, now when we come to the form and we tap, you realize that it's this circular indicator that shows. Now let's work on our circular indicator. Now depending on what it is, we want to change the color, which is going to be our foreground color, and the widget dot type. Okay, so now you see it has this for 5 seconds. and then it goes away. And once it's loading, we want to also disable the button. And to do that, once it's already loading, we do not want to trigger the onPressed again. So we say that here, if the widget is not loading, okay, if it's not loading, then we do this, right? So we only allow the user to submit when it's not loading. Once it's loading, we can then press it. Okay, so here let's first print this. Okay, just take this away. Okay, so here if I print this, it's false, it's not loading. So if it's not loading, then it should return this. Sorry. Okay, so now we have this here. Okay, so when it's loading, it won't do anything until it's downloading. Okay, so that's the whole idea. Okay, and then once it's loading, like I said, we do not want the user to be able to change this, so we're going to our test input. So when it's loading in our sign up here, we want to say that here is enabled. It's only enabled when it is not loading, right? So when it's loading, it's not enabled. We do the same thing for this, as well as the password, right? So now we come back to our form. When we submit, we realize it's disabled. We can't do anything until it's done. Then it comes back, right? So that's why it grays out. We want to do the same thing for our checkbox. Okay, so here in our checkbox component, it's enabled. So this by default is true. Then in our unchanged here, what we are going to do is if it's disabled, if it's not enabled, we pass now to this, and that would cause the checkbox to disable. So we have our unchanged here. If I should pass now, and then I come here, you realize that the checkbox is disabled. You cannot do anything to it. Okay, so here what we are going to do is if the widget dot is enabled, right, then we have this, but if it's not enabled, then we pass now. Okay, and let's restart the entire application. Okay, so here let's provide the form, and then put a password. Let's take a look at our checkbox here again in our sign up. So here we then pass the is enabled, and that's if it's not loading, right? So it's only enabled if it's not loading. Now let's try it again. I submit, and I cannot change the text box, as you can see here, right? If I check it and I submit, realize it's grayed out. I cannot do anything until the form has released it. Okay, so that's our form. We've added validation to our form, and we've added a loading state and everything. So that's it for today's episode. In the next episode, we are going to integrate the registration API we did in our previous episodes. We are going to handle the API calls as well as the response we get from the API, including the validation and the success message. So stay tuned. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so and hit the notification bell to be notified on the next update. See you.